Have you ever felt that something fundamental was missing in your spiritual life? That despite all your prayers, worship and devotion, God somehow remained distant, unreachable? A divine power separate from you, listening from afar, but never truly present. What if everything you've been taught about God, prayer, and your relationship with the divine has been fundamentally backward? What if the greatest spiritual minds throughout history have been approaching the entire concept from the wrong direction? This is exactly what spiritual teacher Joel Goldsmith discovered after 30 years of searching through every religion, philosophy, and healing method known to humanity. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? You've prayed fervently for healing, abundance, or guidance, only to feel as though your words were echoing in an empty room? You're not alone. For centuries, humanity has been conditioned to approach spirituality from a place of lack, as separate beings desperately trying to get God's attention, to become worthy of divine love and intervention. In 1946, during what he described as his deepest spiritual crisis, Joel Goldsmith experienced a revelation that shattered everything he thought he knew about God and spirituality. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you understand your relationship with the divine and the very nature of reality itself. Joel realized that God isn't some external power waiting in heaven to be contacted through prayer or worship. The divine isn't separate from you at all. The revolutionary truth he uncovered is that God is your very consciousness when it's free from the illusion of separation. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's the practical foundation for what we perceive as miracles in our lives. Think about those moments of profound peace you've experienced, those flashes of love or sudden knowing that transcended your circumstances. What if those weren't brief connections to something outside yourself, but glimpses of your true nature shining through without the interference of fear-based thinking? What if the Christ, Buddha nature, or divine presence that spiritual traditions have pointed to for millennia is actually your own consciousness in its pure form? This recognition changes everything about how we approach challenges, relationships, health, and abundance. Imagine no longer being a limited human being seeking help from God, but divine consciousness itself, expressing as your individual human experience. The implications of this shift in perspective are profound and far-reaching, affecting every aspect of how we live, heal, and relate to ourselves and others. But how do we make this transition from intellectual understanding to lived experience? What does it mean to practice the presence of God when God isn't somewhere else, but is your very consciousness? And how did Joel Goldsmith apply this revolutionary understanding to create what many have described as miraculous healings and transformations in people's lives? If you're resonating with Joel Goldsmith's transformative teachings, hit subscribe to join our community of spiritual explorers discovering the infinite way together. Joel called this inner divine presence the Christ within, not as a religious concept limited to Christianity, but as a universal principle describing our true spiritual identity. This revelation transcends all religious boundaries and speaks to a hidden truth about our fundamental nature that mystics across traditions have glimpsed throughout history. Think about those moments when inspiration strikes from nowhere, when you feel inexplicable peace amid chaos, or when love flows through you without effort. These aren't random spiritual experiences or lucky encounters with divinity. They're glimpses of your authentic self shining through the clouds of conditioned thinking. Every time you felt connected to something greater, you weren't reaching outward, but simply experiencing your own consciousness without interference. Now, I want to go even deeper into this transformative mindset shift. Joel developed what he called practicing the presence, but this isn't what most people understand as meditation or prayer. Traditional spiritual practices often reinforce the very separation they aim to overcome. You sit down for 20 minutes, reach out to God, and then return to normal life. The revolutionary approach Joel discovered completely reimagines this journey. Rather than seeing yourself as a human being who occasionally has spiritual moments during designated practice times, you begin recognizing yourself as spiritual consciousness, having a temporary human experience in every moment of every day. This fundamental reversal creates a profound impact on how you navigate challenges, relationships, and even mundane activities. Imagine walking through your day, not as someone seeking connection with the divine, but as divine consciousness itself, expressing through your unique human form. The implications of this perspective shift ripple through every aspect of your life experience. The beauty of this revelation is that it's not about adding something new to your life or struggling to achieve some elevated spiritual state. It's about recognizing what's already true beneath the surface appearance of separation. This recognition doesn't happen through effort or spiritual techniques, but through allowing the natural state of your being to reveal itself when the mind stops its constant interference. The practicing isn't something you schedule for morning and evening. It becomes the foundation from which you live every moment. You begin seeing through what Joel called appearances to the underlying harmony that's always been present. Every challenge becomes an invitation to go deeper into truth, to practice seeing beyond the material world to spiritual reality. What makes this approach so different from traditional spiritual paths is that it doesn't require you to reject your humanity or transcend ordinary life. Instead, it transforms ordinary life from within by changing the consciousness from which you experience everything. Your relationships, work, and daily activities become expressions of the divine rather than distractions from it. Write in the comments, "I recognize the presence within," if this perspective shift resonates with your own spiritual journey. This understanding takes us to what Joel described as the most revolutionary aspect of his teaching, the revelation of oneness. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't making a special claim, unique to himself, but revealing a universal truth about every human being's relationship with the divine. Joel taught that the moment we truly realize this oneness, a profound shift occurs. We stop being a person who needs healing and become the very presence that does the healing. Think about the radical implications of this mindset transformation. You're no longer trying to get something from God, whether that's healing, abundance, peace, or guidance. You are the God presence expressing itself as your individual consciousness. This isn't spiritual theory or abstract philosophy. It's the practical foundation for what we perceive as miracles in everyday life. When you approach challenges from this perspective of oneness, you're not trying to solve problems through spiritual effort or technique. You're recognizing that in ultimate reality, the problem doesn't exist because there is no separation from your good. This recognition doesn't deny human experiences or challenges. It simply places them in their proper context within the bigger picture of your spiritual identity. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this profound revelation actually occurs within consciousness. The fascinating discovery Joel made is that this realization doesn't happen through effort, technique, or years of spiritual practice. It happens through what he called resting in the silence of being, a state where thoughts stop trying to fix, change, or improve anything, and the mind releases its grip on outcomes and solutions. This journey into silence reveals one of the hidden truths behind all genuine spiritual transformation. The more we try to achieve spiritual understanding through mental effort, the more we reinforce the very separation we're trying to overcome. The mind that's seeking God is the very obstacle to the realization that there is no separation from God. In those moments when thinking subsides, not through force, but through gentle surrender, truth reveals itself naturally. This isn't about emptying your mind through discipline or technique. It's about allowing the natural silence that exists beneath the constant chatter of thoughts to emerge on its own. In that silence, the illusion of separation dissolves, and your true nature as divine consciousness becomes self-evident. Joel discovered that this silence is not something you create. It's something you allow. It's already there beneath the noise of habitual thinking. When you stop trying to make spiritual progress and simply rest in the awareness that's already present, a space opens where revelation can occur. This is why authentic spiritual realization often happens in moments of surrender rather than in moments of greatest effort. If you've ever experienced a moment where everything suddenly made sense, where clarity emerged not from figuring something out, but from letting go of trying to figure it out, write in the comments, "The silence speaks to me." What makes Joel's approach so revolutionary is how this understanding manifested as what many would call miraculous healing. His method wasn't about sending energy, using affirmations, or treating conditions with spiritual techniques. It was about sitting in the silence of being with those who came to him for help. In this silence, he simply recognized their true spiritual identity beneath the appearance of disease or disorder. Ready to continue this spiritual journey? Subscribe now to access more profound insights that can transform your understanding of consciousness and spiritual reality. One remarkable case Joel documented involved a woman diagnosed with terminal cancer. Doctors had given her no hope for recovery. Instead of trying to treat her condition with conventional or even alternative healing methods, Joel sat with her in this profound silence of being. He didn't see her as a sick person needing healing, but recognized her as spiritual perfection, temporarily obscured by false belief. Within weeks, every trace of cancer disappeared from her body. Medical professionals called it impossible, but Joel understood it as the inevitable result of recognizing truth. The power of this revelation becomes even clearer through the journey of people whose lives were transformed through this understanding. Consider Margaret's story. After 15 years of debilitating chronic pain that dominated every aspect of her life, she had tried everything from conventional medicine to every alternative therapy available. The breakthrough came not during formal meditation, but while washing dishes one ordinary morning. In that mundane moment, something extraordinary happened. Margaret suddenly realized she'd been seeking healing as Margaret, the suffering person. In that instant of clarity, the identity that had been suffering for 15 years simply disappeared from her awareness, and only pure consciousness remained. Within 3 months, the chronic pain that had defined her existence was completely gone. But even more significant was that Margaret discovered she was living from an entirely different foundation. Fear-based thinking had lost its grip on her consciousness. Then there's Robert's behind-the-scenes transformation from financial devastation to unexpected abundance. Facing complete ruin after 20 years of building his business, bankruptcy papers were being prepared, and his marriage was crumbling under financial pressure. Traditional manifestation techniques had only intensified his frustration and hopelessness. Joel taught him something fundamentally different from conventional prosperity teachings. Instead of trying to attract abundance from outside himself, Robert learned to recognize the abundance that was already present in his consciousness as his spiritual birthright. The mindset shift was profound. He stopped seeing himself as lacking and needing to attract prosperity from some external source. as Robert began living from this recognition of inherent wholeness. Rather than acquired prosperity, opportunities appeared naturally without struggle. These revelations weren't limited to physical healing and financial recovery. Sarah's journey through severe depression illustrates how this understanding addresses our deepest emotional challenges. After years of therapy and medication providing only temporary relief, Sarah discovered through Joel's teaching that depression wasn't something wrong with her that needed fixing. It was the natural result of consciousness believing it was separate from its source. If you've experienced a healing or transformation in your own life that seemed to come not from technique, but from a shift in perception, type, "I've witnessed this shift" in the comments. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the practical methodology Joel developed through his decades of spiritual work. Beyond the foundational understanding of oneness, Joel created what he called spiritual treatment. Though this term can be misleading if we view it through conventional healing paradigms. This approach isn't about sending thoughts, energy, or prayers to fix problems. It isn't about visualizing positive outcomes or manipulating energy fields. The revolutionary insight behind spiritual treatment is recognizing the spiritual truth that dissolves the very illusion creating the appearance of problems in the first place. When someone calls a practitioner trained in Joel's approach asking for help with a health challenge, financial crisis, or relationship conflict, the practitioner doesn't try to heal the condition or solve the problem. Instead, they rest in the recognition that in spiritual truth, there is no person with a condition. There is only perfect spiritual being expressing itself. This recognition in consciousness has immediate and tangible effects in what we call the physical world. The practitioner undergoes a complete identity shift from being a helper trying to assist another person to becoming a transparency for truth. This transparency allows divine consciousness to flow without the interference of personal thinking, conditioning, or the belief in separation. In this state of transparent consciousness, healing happens not because something is sent to fix a problem, but because the truth of being dissolves the illusion that created the appearance of discord. This mindset transformation leads to what Joel called spiritual discernment, the developed ability to see beyond appearances to spiritual reality in every situation you encounter. Consider how you perceive a magnificent sunset. You're not simply seeing colored light hitting particles in the atmosphere, you're witnessing infinite beauty expressing itself in form. This same discernment applies to everything in your experience throughout each day. When you look at what appears as lack, discord, disease, or limitation, spiritual discernment reveals these as merely appearances that have no spiritual reality. Behind every appearance of discord lies perfect harmony waiting to be recognized. Behind every appearance of lack lies infinite abundance already present. Behind every appearance of disease lies perfect wholeness that has never been compromised. The hidden truth that Joel discovered is that this discernment isn't about denying what appears to be happening or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing what's really happening behind the appearances, divine consciousness expressing itself perfectly even when that perfection is temporarily obscured by limited perception. This recognition naturally transforms your experience without effort or struggle. You don't change the appearances through force of will or spiritual technique. You see through them to reality, and the appearances naturally align with the truth you're recognizing rather than the illusion you were believing. If you've ever experienced a moment where you suddenly saw through a problem to its solution without figuring it out, share "I've glimpsed behind the curtain" in the comments. One of Joel's most profound and transformative concepts was what he called the art of dying daily. This phrase can be jarring at first. It sounds almost morbid, but it has nothing to do with physical death. Instead, it points to a spiritual practice of allowing the personal sense of self to die moment by moment throughout your day. Think about it. How much of your suffering, anxiety, and limitation comes from identifying with a personal self that feels separate from everyone and everything? This personal sense believes it lacks what it needs, fears what might happen, and constantly struggles to protect and enhance itself. Joel discovered that every time you catch yourself thinking as this separate self, you can consciously let that perception die in that very moment. This isn't about self-denial or asceticism. It's about recognizing when you're operating from the limited perspective of personal identity and choosing to shift to your broader spiritual awareness instead. With each small death of the personal sense, you experience a corresponding rebirth into your true identity as divine consciousness. What's remarkable is that with consistent practice, this dying and rebirthing process becomes increasingly natural and automatic. You don't have to constantly remember to do it. It begins happening spontaneously as your consciousness shifts its foundation from personal identity to spiritual reality. This creates a momentum of transformation that eventually becomes self-sustaining, like a flywheel that continues spinning with minimal effort. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Joel called the middle path, perhaps his most practical and revolutionary discovery about living spiritually in today's world. Unlike many spiritual traditions that suggest withdrawing from worldly life to achieve enlightenment, Joel found that authentic transformation happens while fully engaged with human experience. The middle path means living fully human while simultaneously knowing yourself as divine consciousness. You don't transcend the human experience or escape into some ethereal spiritual realm. You live ordinary human life from your true spiritual foundation. This means you still pay your bills, maintain relationships, care for your body, and fulfill responsibilities. But you do all of this from the recognition of your true nature, rather than from fear, lack, or separation. This approach dissolves the false dichotomy between being spiritual and being practical. Many seekers struggle with this perceived conflict, feeling they must choose between spiritual ideals and worldly effectiveness. Joel discovered that authentic spirituality makes you supremely practical because you're operating from truth rather than illusion, from abundance rather than limitation, from love rather than fear. From this perspective, work becomes worship, relationships become holy encounters, and even the most mundane activities transform into opportunities for divine expression. The ordinary becomes sacred not because you're adding spiritual meaning to it, but because you recognize the spiritual reality that was always present within it. If you've experienced moments where the ordinary suddenly revealed itself as sacred, share "I've touched the infinite in the ordinary" in the comments. While Joel's teachings offer profound liberation, he was always honest about the challenges we face on this spiritual journey. One of the most common experiences he described is what mystics have called spiritual dryness, or the dark night of the soul. These are periods when, despite your deepest understanding and practice, old thought patterns seem to return with surprising intensity. You might find yourself doubting everything you've learned, feeling like you're back where you started, or wondering if any of this spiritual understanding is real or just wishful thinking. What's remarkable about Joel's insight is that he recognized these difficult periods not as failures or regressions, but as evidence of genuine progress. These challenges often arise precisely when consciousness is undergoing its deepest transformations. They represent the final attempts of conditioned thinking to maintain its grip on your awareness before a significant breakthrough. The key revelation here is not to fight against these experiences or judge yourself for having them, but to continue resting in truth even when you don't feel it. Your spiritual understanding doesn't depend on feeling good or having positive experiences. It remains true regardless of temporary emotional states. These darker passages become opportunities to prove to yourself that your foundation isn't built on shifting sands of feeling, but on the bedrock of spiritual reality. Another shadow that appears on the path is what Joel identified as spiritual pride, the subtle tendency to believe you're more evolved, more enlightened, or spiritually superior to others who haven't discovered these truths. This form of separation can actually block your continued unfoldment, creating a new identity of spiritual me that's just as limiting as any other form of personal identity. The antidote Joel prescribed for spiritual pride is genuine humility, recognizing that spiritual understanding is a gift of grace, not a personal achievement or accomplishment. This awareness isn't something you earned or deserved any more than you earned the ability to breathe. When spiritual pride arises, and it will arise even in the most sincere seekers, return immediately to gratitude for the truth revealing itself through your consciousness. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining perhaps the most challenging aspect of Joel's teaching: learning to live without the mental habit of trying to use spiritual truth to get something. The conditioned mind constantly wants to turn these principles into techniques for manifesting desires, solving problems, or achieving better life circumstances. But the moment you try to use truth to get something, you've stepped back into the consciousness of separation. You've become a person who lacks something trying to use spirituality to acquire it. The decision to recognize that you already are everything you could ever need fundamentally changes your relationship with desire itself. Desires don't disappear in this recognition. They transform. They arise from fullness rather than emptiness. They become natural expressions of your spiritual nature, rather than attempts to fill perceived gaps in your experience. If you've noticed your desires shifting from "I need this to be complete" to "I'd enjoy experiencing this as an expression of my completeness," share "My desires are transforming" in the comments. Joel's spiritual journey ultimately led him to what he called the final sacrifice. Perhaps the most counterintuitive yet liberating aspect of this entire path. After years of spiritual seeking, practice, and even profound experiences, he discovered that the ultimate freedom comes when we give up even the desire for spiritual experiences, spiritual progress, or advanced spiritual understanding. This revelation strikes at the very heart of the spiritual search itself. As long as you're seeking something spiritual, enlightenment, awakening, deeper understanding, mystical experiences, you're maintaining the fundamental illusion of separation from what you seek. The very act of seeking reinforces the belief that what you're looking for is something other than what you already are. The final sacrifice isn't something you can accomplish through effort or discipline. It comes through what Joel called grace, those spontaneous moments when seeking naturally stops, not because you found what you were looking for, but because you suddenly realize the seeker and the sought are one and have always been one. The search ends not through achievement but through recognition. These moments of grace can't be produced through effort or spiritual techniques, but they can be welcomed. When you stop trying to become spiritual and simply rest in what you are right now, without judgment, without trying to improve or change anything, the spiritual nature of your being reveals itself naturally. This is the true end of the spiritual path, because you realize there was never anywhere to go or anything to attain. The revelation that accompanies this final sacrifice is profound freedom, living without spiritual seeking while being constantly aware of your spiritual nature. You become ordinary in the most extraordinary way, completely human while completely divine. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the ultimate fruit of Joel's teaching, what he called the mystical life. This isn't some exotic state reserved for monks, nuns, or spiritual adepts who've withdrawn from ordinary existence. It's available to everyone because everyone is spiritual consciousness expressing as individual human experience. The mystical life is living in constant conscious communion with the divine presence that you are. Prayer transforms from periodic asking for help, guidance, or intervention into an ongoing recognition of truth. Every moment becomes an opportunity to witness infinite love, expressing itself as your experience and the experience of everyone around you. In this state of consciousness, work naturally becomes worship. Relationships naturally become holy encounters. The most ordinary activities naturally become expressions of divine creativity. You realize that the mystical life isn't separate from ordinary human life. It's ordinary human life lived from your true spiritual identity. What's remarkable about Joel's discovery is that nothing in your external circumstances needs to change for you to live the mystical life. Only the foundation from which you perceive and respond to everything shifts. This shift in consciousness transforms your entire experience of life from within, without requiring any change in external conditions. If you've experienced moments where the boundary between the spiritual and ordinary dissolved, revealing that they were never truly separate, share "I've tasted the mystical life" in the comments. As we've explored Joel Goldsmith's revolutionary spiritual discoveries, I hope you've caught glimpses of what he called the infinite way, this profound path of recognizing your true identity beyond all appearances. What makes Joel's teaching so powerful is that it's not about adding more spiritual practices to your life or becoming a different person. It's about recognizing what's already true about who you really are. This recognition isn't something you achieve through years of spiritual effort. It's available in this very moment whenever consciousness rests in its own nature. The journey isn't about becoming spiritual, but recognizing the spirituality that has always been your true identity. If something in this message resonated deeply with you, as if you were remembering something you've always known rather than learning something new, I'd love for you to leave a comment saying, "This truth was already within me." Your perspective adds valuable dimensions to this conversation that others can benefit from. I create these videos to build a community of spiritual explorers who are interested in going beyond traditional approaches to discover what's really true. If you found value in today's exploration, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together. Each like also helps share these transformative ideas with others who might be searching for exactly this understanding. The mystical life that Joel discovered isn't reserved for special people or dedicated seekers. It's the birthright of every human being because it's what we already are beneath the appearances. I've prepared another video that explores how to apply these principles to heal specific challenges in relationships. Click right here and let's continue exploring this infinite way together.